I wanted to talk to you today about the psychology around eating. Now, this is going to come up for you if you change your diet or if you're wanting to remove things like wheat and dairy from your diet, which can feel like removing a major food group. So from my observation, it seems that there's two major approaches to this. One is the cold turkey approach, which can be a good thing, and the other is a process of successive change. Now, if you are in fact someone who can do a cold turkey approach, you need to consider that the body is a very complex organism and that a lot of what's happening in it is automatic and below the level of our conscious awareness. So you want to be sure that you aren't actually fixing what isn't broken. But I do think for most people that a moderate approach is going to be what works best. Now you have to consider what your own psychology is, and you have to work with your own weaknesses. So for example, if you fall off the wagon, you need to consider that you had been on the wagon and that in itself was a success. So you want to just get right back on it. Because you see, it's going to take you time to figure out how to do this, right? You're going to build efficiencies in it as time goes on. Another thing you can do is to bring in a change for 21 days, and this will imprint your body-mind complex. It can be subtle, but it definitely is effective. So if you do get onto this path, and then you go back to where you were before, for example, when you've fallen off the wagon, you need to consider that you can't necessarily go back in at the same level that you were. And probably the best example that I can give for this is stars, who, for example, go into rehab for drugs or even alcohol, and then they have a relapse, and when they go back, particularly with drugs, to the level that they were at before, they OD, and it's because their body has become cleaner, and it can't handle the level that it was at before, right? So you need to consider this in terms of the food that you're eating, right? If you do go back to, eating, say, junk food, for example, you're going to have a greater reaction in the same way that the stars would. Because even when the stars started doing drugs, you've got to consider that they built up to the level that they were at when they finally went into rehab. Okay? So it can take years for these changes to take effect in your body, and you're going to need to make adjustments for your personal needs based on some kind of ideal maybe that you are holding in your head. So some of the tips that I like to use, for example, are putting obstacles in my way. So if I want some chocolate, there's only a certain kind of chocolate that I'm going to eat. It's very expensive or it's very hard to get. I have to go a long way. And so this is going to make it much more difficult for me to actually indulge in these things. So some of the other things to consider, for example, are you want to set goals for yourself, right? You want to make them in small increments that are achievable. And you especially want to make sure that you have some kind of plan in place once you actually achieve the goal. Because in some ways, this can be the most perilous time if you don't actually have a plan in place for continuity. So do consider that if you take 3 steps forward and then you end up moving 2 steps backwards, you actually are still moving forwards, and that this is a success in and of itself. Believe me, this is really true.